I'm going to start us off with an introduction. My name is Brittany Knowles, and I have the wonderful, amazing pleasure of being the Learning and Development Specialist for none other than Career Circle. I have, what is this? Honey blonde ombre braids, a natural hairstyle. I have on wide brim glasses and a smile. I'm currently sitting in my home office. I'm going to turn this over to our amazing team. Lindsay, can you please introduce yourself to our viewing audience on this afternoon?
I'd be happy to. Thanks, Brittany. My name is Lindsay Megan. My pronouns are she, her. I am also currently sitting in my home office, and I am a blonde with green eyes. I am wearing a navy blue shirt with some lace at the top to make it fancy. And I am very excited. I am currently the partnerships and operations manager here at Career Circle, and just very excited to have today's discussion. I'll turn it over to Cecily.
Thanks, Lindsay. Hi, everyone. Good afternoon. I'm Cecily Gugesberg. My pronouns are she, her, hers, and I am the Director of Product and Marketing at Career Circle. I have dark, long brown hair, blue eyes. I am wearing a fancy satin multicolor shirt, and I'm currently sitting in my home office, which is like a peacock color. I think that's what you could call a peacock blue, with some curtains behind me. So happy to be here today. I'll turn it over to Tim.
Thanks, Cecily. My name is Tim, and my pronouns are he, him. I have black hair and brown eyes. I'm wearing a blue polo, my favorite color, and I'm sitting at home. And behind me is a Japanese painting that I really like, The Waves of Kanagawa. I'm currently not working, but what I do right now is I volunteer to help young adults with autism and disabilities enter the workforce and build job skills. Great to be here.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Lindsay, Cecily, and Tim. Now it's time to dive into the content. I'll have Cecily kick us off, but would love to hear from all the panelists on this question. Cecily, did you pivot careers or experience a career gap? What was that like for you?
Yeah, I actually have both. So I'll speak to both of it. And I'll kind of tell my story. I think that's the best way to kind of explain it. And I'm getting over an upper respiratory. So apologies for all the coughing. About 10 years into my career, I was in a role that required significant travel. And when I say significant travel, I mean I was in a hotel 250 nights a year. So it was super good for my Marriott status, but not so good for my mental health, is like how I like to say it. And I was experiencing extreme burnout. But at the time, I don't think that I really knew that. My body was trying to tell me that, but I didn't know that yet. So I hit the pause button. I stepped away from the corporate world. I really worked on myself during that time. Shout out to my therapist. I truly believe in the power of therapy. I invested in myself, got a certification that aligned with an area of interest that I'd always wanted to pursue. And I really took time to figure out what I wanted to do next, which was important to me. When I re-entered the workforce, I had a clear idea of what I wanted, I think I could say, from an employer and what skills I wanted to use every day that really brought me joy that maybe I didn't get to use before. And through that experience, I had a career pivot, actually two pivots, if you count them both, which I'm happy to talk more about like in detail later. But I did have two pivots throughout my career breaks. I took a second break later, actually, after having my daughter as well, because I wasn't ready to go back to work after the traditional maternity leave. And I took 6 months off at home with her.
Awesome.
Yeah.
I'd love to hear from all the panelists on this particular topic. And I can't wait to hear about these pivots like in more detail. I heard a little bit before about you taking some time off to spend with your beautiful daughter. I can't wait to hear more. Lindsay?
Yeah, I'd be happy to go. So I took a career break at the end of 2021. I was in a very high stress, high profile leadership role at a company that I had been with for about 15 years. And my husband and I had been trying to have a baby for about 2 years. And we had identified that we were going to need to do IVF. So if anybody who knows someone or has potentially gone through IVF, that in itself can be a stressful endeavor, and stress plays a major role into some of the outcomes. I ultimately was also looking at the next kind of chapter of my life. Once I had that baby, what did I want it to look like? And I identified that I was going to take a step back and take the career break to do the IVF process. I did 6 rounds of IVF, and I'm happy to say I have a 1-year-old daughter who just turned 15 months and was well worth every single second of that. I did somewhat pivot into the role that I have here at Career Circle. It was a little bit of a different industry, some different skill sets. Kudos to Kim Cedar, who runs Career Circle. She sat me down and said, Lindsay, you have a lot of experience, and had me showcase what did I like to do and what did I not so much like to do, and where did my skill sets best align. And from there, I've been with Career Circle for the past 2 years, and I've really been able to jump into a role that I love, that I'm using the skills that I had gained from my previous employer, but really tapping into some of those transferable skills most specifically. And kudos to Cecily, because I knew her personally prior to coming over here, and she was a very large encouragement for me, and a big reason why I was feeling comfortable. So I'm happy to have this conversation today, and I hope that we can continue to encourage others to do the same.
Wow. I'm just going to take a pause for a second, because Lindsay is actually my direct supervisor, and it's so amazing to be led by someone who's actually doing the work that they're passionate about. And so I'm a recipient of someone seeing something amazing in you and putting you in the right position for you to thrive and for you to help others to thrive and give those success optimizers. So that's so cool. So cool. Tim, I'd love to hear from you.
Yeah. So I've worked in the tech industry for 10 years. I did a mix of tech consulting, some customer facing roles for implementation teams, and then also as a product manager. And last year, I started to have some vision issues in the spring. And unfortunately, those really limit the time that I can spend in front of a computer and the time that I can read. And so I had to take an unplanned departure from my work, and especially working remotely. And it took me a while to figure out what was going on. But after working with a number of eye doctors, I figured out it was a combination of severely dry eyes that had built up over time, as well as some issues with the function of my eyes, as far as how they focus, how they work together, how my brain and my eyes work together. And so I had to take, I've been on a break ever since last spring. Thankfully, I'm really grateful to have a coverage from long-term disability, as I work with eye doctors to see what I can do for treating my dry eyes, and then also treating the function of my eyes with vision therapy. So that's the journey that I've been on. Since I have to limit the time that I spend in front of computers, I'm not able to do the work that I previously did. But what I've been able to do, and one of the ways that I pass the time is I volunteer in sort of a coaching role for helping those young adults with autism disabilities. And yeah, I'm really grateful for the opportunity to be able to do that and to help them. And I will say that going from being able-bodied and having full function of my eyes to then having to deal with what's essentially considered a disability with the limited use of my eyes has really helped me build empathy for these young adults that I'm helping often get their first job and get an internship to build up job skills. And so that's where I'm at right now. I'm still not sure when I'll be able to return to any sort of full-time work, but for now, I'm on long-term disability. I'm going through treatments for my eyes, and then with the time and the energy that I have, then I volunteer to help those young adults.
That is so incredible and so fitting that you're a part of this conversation as we're gearing up for the month of October and Indeed Month. Thank you so much for the time and the effort that you're putting into these young people. I commend you on that. So 2 things. I absolutely want to follow up on that previous question, but I also want to give a directive to the audience. As you all are listening to these inspiring, awesome stories, please make sure that you are taking the time. Think of some questions that you may want, because I'm not the only one that wants to get all the tea, right? And so make sure that you're typing in the chat. And if you hear anything that resonates with you, give us an emoji, whatever you need to do. We want to be able to hear from you, because I know that this is hitting you in the same way that it's hitting me. All right. So just following up on that first question. What are some of the biggest learnings from those experiences? And I'd love to hear from the entire panel on this particular question.
Yeah, I can jump in first, Brittany.
Mhm.
I really learned because I did re-enter the workforce after my first break, and it was a different type of role than the traveling role. But I did find, and it actually wasn't an external consulting, so a little bit less stress being internal on a team. I did
Mhm.
find that I brought a lot of the same tendencies with me, so I didn't change personally that much. I have a lot of the same tendencies of being an overachiever and not my initial reaction when someone says, "Hey, can you take this on?" is to say yes. I want to
Mhm.
please people, and I learned through this career break the tools to actually put boundaries in place and make sure my mental health was protected. So no matter what role I went to, I actually had new tools to make sure that I didn't sacrifice myself, which I really did previously. Because no career or job is worth that. And you really sometimes need to take a step back to learn how to build those tools of resilience and ability to say no and prioritization and managing up. And so from the career break, my biggest learning was that I might not fully change through this process, right? But I did learn ways to manage my tendencies so that I didn't sacrifice myself, which is really important for me moving through life.
So let me just say, it's so funny that you say that because I look at you as superhuman. Like literally, I will send an email at 1:12 and you're responding with a whole paragraph and essay at 1:13. So if this is you with boundaries, I can only imagine. Like I thought it, and then you sent me an email about it. Like
Oh,
you
you
are
make me laugh.
a
I do. I've got
whole
bumpers
nother
and boundaries, I promise.
what
You should have seen me a decade ago and what that was like.
I can only imagine. I can only imagine. Tim, did you want to share some of the learnings that you had from your career gap, career pivot?
Yeah. A journey that I've been on myself, and also something that I do a lot with the coaching that I have for these young adults, is to not dwell or spend too much attention on the things that I cannot do. And in some cases, for some people, those are accommodations in the workplace. Instead, it's really to focus on capabilities. What are the things that I can do? So with the limited use of my eyes, yes, I have to limit how much time I spend in front of the computer and how much reading I do. But it doesn't stop me from spending time outside. And thankfully, a lot of the work that I do is at a farm, at an 18-acre farm, where I can spend a lot of time outside, and I can work with these young adults doing a lot of things outside. And that we can also focus on the things that we can do. So I can still coach, and I can still help people just talk about where are they trying to go with their career, what are the skills that they can have, where are the areas they want to build experience. Something that I've done on the side over the years is I'm also a swim coach, and so it's been great to transfer some of those skills over to helping these young adults. And so, yeah, I'm really grateful that even though I have limited use of my eyes, I've been able to explore and ask myself and be on this journey about what are the things that I still can do, even though I have very limited use of my eyes. And with each of the young adults I work with, they all have their unique situation and what they're dealing with, and also their unique skills and experience. And a lot of my goal working with them is to help them figure out what are the things they can do if they have limited use of a certain part of their body, or something that they just have a lot of difficulty with. Okay, well, let's talk about the things that you can do and how those align with the areas of the business that you can provide value. And so that's been a journey both for myself and also for each young adult that I work with.
Awesome, Tim. Awesome. That is just such clearly a story of resilience and also finding the positivity, finding how the glass is half full as opposed to half empty. I love that. Thank you so much for sharing. Lindsay, can you share what your learnings have been?
So I think the biggest takeaway for me is to not let fear be a blocker. So really to take a step back and look at what was of most importance to me. And if fear was not there, what would I do? What would I want to do? And sometimes I think we tell ourselves a story saying, well, if I take this break, or if I don't take this role, or if I pivot, or if I try something and I don't succeed, it's going to completely and catastrophically destroy my career. And this has taught
Mm,
me that nothing could be further from the truth. that you are more than one decision, you are more than one career break, you are more than just one job, and that's not what defines you. And I think being able to do that and see, oh, this wasn't as scary. This actually has worked out to my benefit in so many different ways. I've learned so many new skills. I've met so many different new people. Has really been something that I think is super powerful. And I would just say, the other thing, I also recognize that being able to take a career break like I did was a privilege. That I want to make sure that all of the panelists, we talked about this pretty extensively. Sometimes we're taking career breaks because we have no other choice. Sometimes we're taking them as a choice like I did, and that was a privilege. But I think really being able to apply those learnings has really helped me be successful in this role, and not only as a professional, but as a mother as well.
100%. So y'all just dropped so many wonderful nuggets. Boundaries, being fearless, and being positive while going through a situation where you need to be resilient. I love that. I love that so much. So Cecily, this next question is for you. What made you decide to pivot careers, and how did you know this was the career you wanted to transition into? What made you feel most supported while navigating your return to the workforce?
Really good question. So I've had two, like I said, two different types of pivots. So the first one, after hitting the pause button, after being at an organization for 10 years and experiencing that burnout, I pivoted. It wasn't as much of a career as it was, I guess, industries. So I was externally facing, which is really high pressure, consulting, right? Like a sales type of mentality. And I knew going back into the workforce, I needed something different for me to re-enter. So that pivot was more just, okay, I wanted to still use the skills I'd built over that time from a recruiting workforce solutions standpoint, but I wanted a less of that pressure and stress from an external standpoint. So I managed a staffing team internally, which also was really exciting because during my break, I studied to get my SPHR, which was a certification that I qualified for, but I'd never actually gotten. And so I took the test and I got it. And that really filled my bucket of, oh my gosh, yes, I do know so much. Investing in yourself during this time and having that validation really helped build my confidence to go back into the workforce. So that pivot, when I went to an internal team and managed an internal talent acquisition team, that was the reason why, just a shift in what I needed from a culture standpoint. But then when I re-entered the workforce after my second break, after having my daughter, I needed something different in terms of flexibility. So I was open to finding something that was maybe part-time contract, and I went at it as, what did I want to do at that point? And I looked at my skill set, and I had a ton of operations management experience, even though I'd never been in an operations management role. And so I started looking at what translated well. And I actually started at Career Circle, believe it or not, 5 years ago as the operations manager, part-time. I think I was working 3 days a week at first, went up to 4. I slowly eased into what I could take on at that time in my life with having a 6-month-old at the time. And it was a really nice fit for me because I could use some of my superpowers that I knew I had. And I was very thankful that they used skills-based hiring, where they looked at my skills. They allowed me to use the ones that I really wanted to utilize on a daily basis. From there, what was really interesting is I started getting curious about other departments, and product, which is how we kind of design, build, develop the website and mobile app for Career Circle, was always an area that interested me because some of my key skills are ideation, strategy, input, like some of the things that align really well with product management. And I knew that, but I'd never had a chance to do that type of role before. So I started shadowing and I started learning. And when the opportunity came up, I said, hey, I am ready to take on a bigger role. And I think that my skill set would really align with that. So my skills have kind of driven where my career's taken me, I guess. And I've continued to invest in the skills that I feel really passionate about and that I like doing. And I won't say it wasn't without, it was with a lot of support. So I got mentors internally, externally, to teach me about product. I was having calls to understand, well, how do I do this? And how do I organize a backlog? And what do you mean about a user story? I mean, I was learning every day. So I was really putting the effort in, but my base of the skills that I already knew I had and that I'd showcased in previous roles allowed me to make that pivot. So I guess the best advice I can give is get curious, build a network, reach out to people that you see doing a job that you really would want and learn more. They'll be willing to talk to you, most of them, to say, hey, yeah, I'd love to jump on a call and tell you about what I do and how I got here. And don't be afraid to kind of put yourself out there, because you never know what path you might find.
100%. 100%. So, y'all, I'm so excited because we have a whole bunch of activity in the chat, y'all. Okay. Y'all are resonating with people. And I know that this is off script, but I feel like we need to address some of these questions. All right. Y'all okay with that? Us going off script just a little bit? Awesome. So, please discuss the pros and cons of disclosing a disability, even if it does not necessarily impact your ability to do a job. And anyone can jump in on that one.
Yeah, I'm happy to jump in. So for myself, I'm not ready to re-enter the workforce yet. I'm still trying to figure out treatments and what my own capability is. But the coaching that I provide to a lot of these young adults that I work with is kind of going back to what I was saying earlier, with really focusing on your capabilities. And I think there was also a con about growth mindset. When I am interviewing and hiring these young adults to intern or work in our program, a lot of what I look for is that growth mindset. Are they willing to try things out? And are they willing to learn and jump in and try out some things that maybe they haven't done before? And also I'm very curious to have our conversation focus a lot more on what are their capabilities, what are their strengths, what are the areas that they want to explore. And I care a lot more about that than if they were to tell me the things that they aren't able to do, don't want to do. I'm much more focused on what you were mentioning about glass half full. What are the ways that you can do things, and what areas can you be involved with? And so yeah, that's what I would suggest. And I believe employers are not supposed to ask you if you don't want to disclose it yourself. Yeah, I've really tried to keep all of the conversations, all of the hiring conversations around what can you do, which areas of the business can you be involved with. And a lot of what I try to do as both being a hiring manager for our program, as well as being sort of the manager and the coach, is the alignment of the areas of the business and where people are needed with what does each unique individual bring? What are their strengths, the areas that they want to learn, and what can they bring? So that's where I keep a lot of the conversation. And if a potential person joining our program wants to disclose things, I'm open to that. But I try to keep most of the conversation around what can you do?
Absolutely. 100%. Thank you, Tim. Was there anyone else that wanted to add to that particular question?
It's not specific to disclosing a disability, but sometimes we get the question, and I might be jumping ahead in the conversation, so apologies, but about talking about your career break during interviews, or like how to present it kind of on a resume. That was something that I was really worried about. And I did take the approach, and everyone might choose to do it differently, but I was very honest about it, because I accomplished a lot during that career break. Like, I look back, and not only the work I did on myself, but getting a certification. I actually, when I was ready, because I did need to make some money on the side, so I started making jewelry and selling it at a farmer's market. Like, there's passion projects that can turn into things during your career break that you can showcase as starting a small business, you know? So I am very much I'd rather showcase it and put it on my resume, but show what I was able to accomplish, because then I'm not hiding anything from an employer. I can share my truth, my story, and also, like, wow, like, a lot of people when I was interviewing said things like, I'm impressed. I'm so like, I wish I'd done that, you know, when I was at the point where maybe I needed to do that. Like, it was very positive. And it was very scary. So it was positive, but it was scary to do it. So I understand the hesitation, but for me, that was the best way to approach it. And I'm happy with that approach, but not everyone might feel comfortable with that.
Absolutely. And let me just say, yes, You did go ahead, you overachiever, you.
Oh,
Okay.
yeah.
No need to ask that question later.
We can
So
keep talking
someone
about it though.
someone actually what you were talking about resonated with them. They said, I am in a similar situation that Cecily was in, taking a career break and changing careers. I would love to hear how Cecily addressed both of these during the application process. This is the last question from QA. And I'll get back into those
Yeah.
other questions.
I was so nervous. So I'm not going to say like it was not easy. I was so nervous. How am I going to answer that question in an interview? How much of my story am I comfortable sharing? And I did come up with like a talk track where I felt comfortable, where I wasn't sharing everything, but I was honest. I said, and part of it was because I knew I was so good at what I did, but I burned myself out. So there's no shame in that, right? And I had to get rid of that shame. And I was honest about it in interviews. I just said I hit pause on my career as I reevaluated. I took time to invest in myself. Here are some of the things I accomplished during that time, and now I'm fully ready to re-enter the workforce in a role that aligns best with me. And that's really the talk track. Like it's keeping it high level, but still acknowledging that you took a career break, here's what you accomplished, and that you're ready to re-enter. As an employer, they likely won't ask additional questions because that's not really appropriate right at that point. But you're able to share as much as you're comfortable sharing. And I did put it on my resume as career break. And then I would put the things that I did, got my certification. I started a small business selling my jewelry during that time. So there's things that you might be volunteering, like Tim. There's so much you can accomplish during that time. And even if you haven't accomplished those things yet, you still might. And even if you don't, you can still put traveled, worked on myself, whatever it is you did, you still accomplished something. You worked on yourself is an accomplishment. So I hope that helps. That's how I approached it.
Absolutely. Was there anything else? I saw, Lindsay, you unmuted yourself. Did you have something you wanted to add to?
I do. I completely agree with Cecily. And one thing I would say is, if you're coming and explaining all the things Cecily said, and you have an employer that says, I'm still not going to hire you because you took an intentional career break or not, that's probably not an employer that you're going to align with anyway. And so from my perspective, having the conversation and being able to very articulately explain what it is you did, why you took the career break, and move on. Don't dwell on it. You're probably dwelling on it more, quite frankly, than the employer is going to throughout the process. They're really interested, if they're a good hiring manager or recruiter, in identifying what skills you have and how you might best support the role that they're interviewing for. Focus on those things, but identify that you did have that career break and what you might have accomplished during that time period.
Can I just say mic drop? What? Like you literally said, as a talent seeker, as a job seeker, I am wanting to connect with organizations that are going to celebrate me, that I'm not having to hide certain areas or components of who I am or my journey to this point. And so if they can't accept that this is who I am and the journey that I've been on, they're not good enough for me. That resonated with me so good, so good.
One of the things, to piggyback off of that a bit, one of the things that I always forgot, and my therapist actually helped me with this when I was re-entering, was they aren't just interviewing you, you're interviewing them. And when I changed that mind shift a bit, I was like, oh my, yes, I have questions. Is this going to be the environment where I can thrive? And 100%. I am interviewing you just as much as you're interviewing me. And so changing that mindset a little bit really helped me. So great.
100%. Yes. That hit me. I could have like shook my whole head off how much I was like, yes, this was what needed to be said. 100%. So getting back into the questions, what are some of the things that caused you to pause or made you nervous when preparing to re-enter the workforce? You all have kind of already alluded to this question, but I still felt like it needed, some time. Let's kind of go through this a little bit. And this is one for all of you. The nerves behind re-entering the workforce and what that looks like.
I can jump in. One of the things that worried me, I guess you could say, was I had only been with a company after my first career break for 10 years. I had had a very successful career. And I think Tim and Lindsay and I talked about this a little bit of, you have so much who you are kind of wrapped into that. And I had a lot of self-doubt of, was that a fluke? Would I be successful somewhere else? Was I really as skilled in some of those areas that I thought, that I built a successful career, or was it just because I was with that one company? So I had a lot of self-doubt around, would I be successful somewhere else? How do I talk about my career break? That was one, like I mentioned. So those were some of the things that I struggled with the most when re-entering. But part of it was just getting over, I had to get to a place where I was ready, number one. So you have to know when you're ready, because I think Lindsay and I talked at length at times when she was going through her career break, and I was like, you're not ready yet. You're not ready, and that's okay. And so you need to take time till you're at the point of being ready. But when you are ready, I think you'll actually be surprised, because you are building so many skills during this time that when you're ready to put yourself out there, I know I felt like I was a very different version of myself and more in control than I'd ever been. So I walked away, I remember distinctly, from one interview, and I was like, wow, I'm really qualified for that. And I impressed I was very much in a position of, I was not expecting to feel the way I did, but putting myself out there was the hardest part, because I was afraid of the rejection. So once I started doing it though, and I started just putting myself out there and continuing to try, and it took me a long time, it didn't happen overnight. I actually was happily surprised by how I felt during the process, which wasn't what I expected. So you might be surprised as you put yourself out there and have that first conversation of, why did you take the career break?
And I know, like I said, you all kind of touched on this a little as you all were responding to other ones. And so if this one, everyone doesn't want to add input, that is okay. Cecily, wonderful response. Anyone going once, going twice? Lindsay, this next question is for you. Did you have a coach, sponsor, or mentor to assist you during your journey?
I had a few. I would say one of them is on this call. I think some of the things I had struggled with previously is just the ability to be able to say that out loud. What if I do these things? And if you're really taking an introspective look, like, what are people going to think of me when I'm doing it? And I very much sometimes struggled with, what am I walking away from? But reaching out and having these conversations where you can just be your authentic self and have a conversation about, let's just lay it out on the table. Here's what I'm afraid of. Can we talk it through? Sometimes just having that conversation makes all the difference. I think once I started to have those conversations, what I identified, there were so many other people that had either taken a career break that I was unaware of, or that had considered doing the same. I cannot begin to tell you the amount of people that called me after I announced that I was taking my career break and said, I'm looking to do the same thing. I was nervous. I always say courage is contagious. And so I think sometimes just having that support system, look around you and identify who might be some people that you could reach out to and say, to Cecily's point earlier, I'm looking for a little advice, or can I pick your brain for just 10 minutes? You would be surprised at how willing people are, and at the same time willing to open up about their own experiences. I think the more that we openly kind of talk about some of these things, the better positioned we're going to be when we are looking for our next role, because we're also going to expand our network from that standpoint.
100%. 100%. Next question for Tim and Cecily. How can individuals leverage volunteer work, freelance projects, or part-time roles to bridge gaps in their resumes? And Cecily, you already kind of went into that with your small business. And Tim, you already kind of went into that, talking about the volunteer work that you're currently doing. So give it to me. What do you think?
Well, I view experience as experience. And in the past, when I have been a hiring manager in the corporate world before I was dealing with my vision issues, I did hire a number of people who had done various transitions and career breaks, especially family-related ones, caring for a child or for a parent or anything like that. And I will say the ones that had interviewed about it well and presented it well, they really owned it. And I was actually really fascinated by a lot of the conversations and interviews that I had with people who had very meaningful career breaks and were able to gain a lot of meaningful experience. And yeah, I would say that it was when someone is really able to own their own story, and I can really see their identity shining through about like this was not necessarily a bad thing, but they're really framing it in the broader sense of all of their experience and the skills that they gained from that. I ended up hiring a number of those people. And so, yeah, I would say you sort of have the choice of how you want to present yourself as you're interviewing and as you're connecting with potential employers. And I was very impressed by some people who did a really good job of telling that arc about here's some of their experience, here's what they did on their career break. They didn't necessarily always have to call it a career break. Sometimes it's just, this is what I was doing during this period. And they were able to tell me about the experiences they gained during that. And a lot of the time for the roles that I was hiring back then, I actually felt like that experience was rather helpful in helping them do the job that I hired them to do.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Cecily, thank you so much, Tim.
Yeah, I mean, I agree completely. I love the people who owned it, I think probably shine through from their authenticity. And I agree with that completely if you're comfortable doing that, right? So I think I mentioned it before, but I encourage people to put it on their resume, and you can put bullet points underneath that are still in the quantifiable, like, right, I achieved whatever you achieved and what the results were. If it was that you created you got, what are those crafting things that the Cricut, I want one so bad, a Cricut, and you started making things on the side and selling them at the farmer's market. I did jewelry. You could do so many things, right? You might volunteer, and you can put that in a format that's, I volunteered to help with this organization. What did you accomplish and what were the results, right? So there's still a way that you can make it a traditional resume format of what your accomplishments were during that time. So I'm a big proponent of putting it on your resume because it's probably going to be more questions if hiring managers see a gap on your resume and there isn't anything there and you have no way to explain it when it's just submitting an application. So I definitely would encourage you to put something on there and put bullet points underneath your career pause, career break. I've seen it positioned a few different ways, career pivot, right? Whatever it is, however you want to write it. I think I put career break and then put the bullets underneath it. Mm-hmm. And then I talked about it in my interview, similar to what Tim suggested.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for sharing that. Lindsay, this next question is for you. What are some ways you found help maintain confidence and self-esteem after a prolonged career break?
I think the first and foremost, I mentioned the exercise of creating a list. And so really taking a step back and identifying, what did I feel like my skills were? What did I feel like I not only excelled in, but were some things I potentially wanted to work on? And then aligning, what did I like to do and what didn't I like to do? Mm-hmm. From there, just creating that list. And I was laughing because I actually called Cecily and said, what do you think an employer wants to see on this list? And she said, no, that's not the purpose of this exercise. The purpose of the exercise is really to do some introspective work to identify what do you want to do next. And it was so spot on because when I really looked at it, there were a lot of skills that I had that could be transferable to a lot of different roles. But then I wanted to align it to what did I like to do? That exercise really helped put me in a really nice spot. So then when I was identifying what I wanted to do next, I had a framework that I was saying, here's my true north. Here's what I'm working towards. Here's how I can speak to those opportunities and really start to align my resume accordingly. And I think just doing that simple exercise really put me in a much more confident position to be able to go out and say, oh yeah, I do have a lot of transferable skills and experience. And there are things that are valuable. And being able to apply those to my next role is really what I leaned into. And I would encourage everyone to do that very simple same column exercise.
And absolutely. Go ahead, Cecily.
I had I guess you'd call it like a coaching call with someone who's currently on a career break the other day. And she was asking me some of the same questions of like, these are the roles I've had in the past. I didn't really enjoy this, but I enjoyed this. And I had her do the same exercise. And one of the things that we did after that was really interesting because it was really clear that the role she was currently doing most recently wasn't the role that brought her joy. And that's, that makes sense. Okay. But one of the roles she previously had, which I guess at that organization they called like a training and implementation specialist, she really loved. And so, but when I started looking at like training and implementation specialist job postings, it was not what she did. And so I started asking her, can you break down like the things you liked doing about that role, right? And she broke it down. And immediately I looked at that list and I was like, that's a customer success manager in most companies.
Ah.
So sometimes you also are going to see like aha moments of the list of things that you like doing. Your previous company might have called it something, but in a lot of companies, right, customer success managers take accounts and onboard them. They implement them, they retain them. And in the tech industry, especially, customer success manager is the job title that's well known, right? But training and implementation specialist was what that was called. So it's a really good exercise to do. And sometimes you start to realize I've been looking for the wrong job title, and that's why I'm not seeing maybe what I wanted to see. So if you ever need any, feel free to connect with us on LinkedIn, of course. I'm sure we'll put the links in after the webinar, but happy to like help anyone through those exercises. But it's really cool to see those aha moments. You might have been looking for the wrong job title.
That is really cool. Really cool. So I just want to look. I'm looking at the time. I am Eastern Standard Time, and it is 1:42. Now, they have been in the chat this entire 42 minutes with all kinds of amazing questions for you all. And so I want to give them the last 10, 12 minutes or so of QA. We have 2 more questions that we have. And so I want to try to cut these questions so that we can move on to the QA component. All right. And so, second to the last question, how would you encourage others to explain a career gap due to personal reasons such as caregiving or health issues to potential employers? And this question is for Tim and Lindsay.
So I would say personal issues or caregivers. First of all, it starts with how much you're comfortable with sharing, right? I do also, though, say that's a commendable reason to take a break. Let's first start there, right? There are so many skills that you need to be able to do that. Part of my career break was also my father had a stroke, so I was his health surrogate. The amount of planning, delegating, the ability to deal with administrative tasks, the ability to communicate, talking through and identifying, and first of all, giving yourself a step back to say, these are real life skill sets that I am applying every day will actually help you during the interview process. So I think it's first identifying. You may not look at it as something, this is just something you feel like, hey, I was put in this situation. I'm kind of dealing with it in the moment. But if you were to take a step back, it actually, I think, can speak to some of the skill sets that you could bring to the table. Let's take a stay-at-home mom as an example. Wow, is that a huge, huge role. And so the ability to be able to manage and keep up with whatever it is that is at your current responsibility list, that role looks different for everybody, is a commendable feat. I think a lot of employers really just want to see how you think. If you're able to articulate the skills that you learn during that time period and how they can be transferred to the role, those are the other things that you want to take a look at. To Cecily's earlier point, I would also encourage, there may be an entry level point to get back into the workforce that you want to consider. So maybe your end goal is to get to be XYZ position, but in order to get there, you have to take a certain type of a role to get back in. I did the exact same thing. I started working at Career Circle in the operations arm as well, trying to identify what I wanted to do next. I do think that that's something that I would encourage a lot of folks to consider as they're looking for their next kind of stepping stone back into the workforce. So those would be my recommendations and tips.
Thank you, Lindsay. Tim?
Yeah, that was wonderful. I fully agree with all that. Maybe the only thing that I would have to add is to what was I to say? When you're talking about it, maybe prepare a few sentences. Let's say you're on an interview or talking with a recruiter, you could prepare a few sentences and summarize it at a high level, exactly talking about the skills and the experience that you gained, certainly some of the things that you learned. And if they want to dive further into it, they can. But maybe they don't, and maybe you just present it and mention it, acknowledge it, and then you can move on. And I also highly recommend finding people to practice with so that you can really get your narrative down. And I have been a coach for others, and I've also had many people coach me that I can practice with. How do I want to present this when I'm talking to a recruiter? And I do find that going back to experience, that there are a lot of ways that you can talk about a certain experience that you had or what you did during a break and connect that to how that helps you with a certain role. I think a lot about the T-shaped skill set, if any of you have heard of that, where you have the broad horizontal experience and then you have depth in the vertical area. And so I really think that a lot of what you might do during a career break with volunteering and other things, that really helps you build that broad horizontal bit of the T. And with the job that you're applying for, they're probably really looking for where do you have that vertical bit, the depth for this particular role. And so yeah, I think as long as you're framing it that way and you acknowledge it and present it, and then if they want to dive further in, they can. But maybe during that conversation, they want to talk about some other things that were in your career and some previous jobs that you had. So I would present it and then let them see if they want to dive further in, and then also have people to practice with. I've found so much value from just having buddies along the journey to practice with.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for these depth of responses. So we are going to do a quick elevator pitch, concise response to this last question, okay? 30 seconds apiece. Here it is. What advice do you have for those who are currently in a career gap and are looking for work, or those who are looking to switch to a new career?
All right, 30 seconds. I'll jump in. Take the time to reflect and assess, because that's your time, and update your skills. And I think find people who've gone through it. Happy to connect on LinkedIn, like we said, if we can be your people. And if you're looking to switch to a new career, leverage those transferable skills, and consider like using a functional resume, which we can talk about more. Network actively, and identify mentors, I guess, is the best advice I could give. But most importantly, during this time, take care of yourself, because that's the most important thing, and know that what you're doing took courage, and you should be really proud of yourself.
Thank you so much. Next, who wants to jump in?
I could go, Brittany. I would echo everything Cecily just said. I would also say control the controllables. Look around and see what are some of the things that you have the ability today to help to set you up for that next role. If that's networking, if that is really concisely identifying what your elevator pitch is. So if you get a conversation with somebody that you may just meet in a minute or less, of exactly what Tim said, can you identify what it is that you bring to the table? I will just quickly give the anecdote. As a hiring manager, sometimes I've got on and I won't say a word in a 30-minute interview for 15 minutes as somebody goes through their experience. Practicing, I'm going to echo what Tim said, is really key, because if you can succinctly do that, you're going to really put yourself up for success.
Tim?
Such good stuff. The only thing I will add is the power of second degree connections on LinkedIn. I have had so many wonderful conversations where as I'm using LinkedIn search and I'm finding people who are doing a role that I was interested in, or at a company that I'm interested in, I've often just messaged a friend to help connect me. And I've had been able to build a lot of wonderful connections and just gain a lot of valuable knowledge and insight when I have been able to use that. Some of those have led to jobs in the past as well. So I think I can summarize that as don't do this alone, and especially reach out, especially to second degree connections on LinkedIn. It's amazing how quickly you can connect with people in different companies and roles.
Absolutely. So this next question is from our audience. The question reads, I have a question about references. I've taken a career break after the birth of my children, and I've been out for nearly a decade. Some of my potential references have retired or moved on. What do you suggest I do?
Are there peer references available. So maybe not your direct manager, but people that you worked with could always be an option. You could also look at if you're involved, because I think you mentioned it's someone who's staying at home with their kids, Brittany. Did I hear that correctly?
Yes.
Yeah.
After the birth of their children.
Okay,
Absolutely.
awesome.
Mm-hmm.
So there might have been like maybe you were part of a group or an extracurricular activity or a PTA, or like you might have been involved in different things that I know take so much effort. And you could definitely get a reference from someone who is also involved in one of those groups. So there's a lot of ways to kind of go around the direct manager approach if you don't have a direct manager within the last 10 years. And like on the Career Circle platform, we do self-references as well. And so you could always do a copy of your self-reference to showcase that. And then I would suggest getting a peer reference from one of those circles. Lindsay, Tim, any other ideas there?
I would agree. I think that's exactly where my mind was going, is what connections may you have currently. Certainly, I think if there was a boss or a previous manager, having one of those, I actually don't think is a detriment. I think as long as you are listing those in addition to potentially some other references. So I would encourage you to potentially take a look at outside of the scope of that past role, that references can be a wide breadth of folks that can speak to your skill sets and your work ethic.
Absolutely. So next question, could you talk more about entering back into the workforce during a challenging job market?
I can take that one. I recognize that sometimes, particularly as you're in it, it feels like, man, this is a grind, and it is work to find another role. So I want to take a step back and recognize that anyone that's telling you this is an easy process maybe hasn't gone through it or has just gotten lucky. I would say to our previous points, gaining new skills, doing things while you are on the break will help to set you up for success. To Tim's point regarding networking, really taking a look at not only who do you know, but who might they know that can set you up for success. If you're active on LinkedIn, also, I think posting some thought leadership content can be a way that you can showcase some of your skills or expertise in an area while you are looking. I've seen a lot of people that will take that stance, and folks start to follow them and say, oh, interesting, you might be a fit for this type of role. So I think really taking a step back and look at going back to controlling those controllables, those are steps that you can put yourself in a proactive kind of trajectory in order to get early in the next job.
Absolutely. Anybody else want to add to that? Next question. Does changing your mindset to a growth mindset propel you forward in reframing your progress?
I certainly think so. I think that when you are ready to re-enter and you're having conversations with potential employers, or you're just connecting, I think growth mindset is, at least for me, one of the biggest things I look for when I hire people. Sometimes I've chosen someone who really just was overflowing with growth mindset and maybe didn't have quite as as much to the degree of the skills or the direct experience over someone who maybe does have a lot of experience and skills, but doesn't seem like they want to learn or they want to grow. So I really view that as one of those intangible things that hiring managers would really look for when you have enough of the skills and experience to be qualified, but sort of like what are the next areas and maybe the things that are more difficult to teach. I think a lot of the core things you might do on a job, you can learn in the onboarding process, but growth mindset is a very hard thing to teach. But I would say that hiring managers can definitely spot it. So I really try to foster a lot of growth mindset for myself and then the young adults that I work with, and I highly encourage practicing how to let that come out when you are doing your interviews and reaching out.
Thank you so much. Anybody want to add to that, Cecily?
I agree with that completely, and I wholeheartedly believe a growth mindset supports you. I mean, I used to say I'm growing through it when I was in my career break. I know it's like that's instead of go through, right? I'm growing through it. And as a hiring manager, actually, one of the questions I would ask people that I still do when I'm hiring is, what's the last thing that you taught yourself and how did you approach it? I also ask about like, what's the last book or article or thing that you read, because it just shows me like, do they have that interest and that curiosity and that growth mindset? Like those are the things that you look for, that are those intangibles. So if you can showcase that during your job search, I think that will take you a long way, because it's something a lot of hiring managers look for right now.
Absolutely. And let me just put this out here, because you may have someone in the audience that's like, what is growth mindset? And so the best way that I can approach it would be to explain the opposite, fixed mindset. When you have a set amount of skills or a set number of skills, and you don't want to venture outside of that because it may be something that you're not necessarily good at. Whereas, quote unquote, that you're not necessarily good at. Whereas growth mindset is, no matter what you put in front of me, I know that if I put the amount of effort and work into whatever it is, I'm going to be able to figure it out. I have the tenacity, the grit, the resilience to be able to learn this new skill. And I don't shy away from those opportunities for growth, right? I go towards that. And so I just wanted to make sure, as we're talking about this topic, that our audience understands it holistically. So we have time for one more question. Last question. What do we do if our support system is limited?
I can take that. I think certainly recognizing some people are more fortunate than others with their connections and their career. But at the same time, with today's technology, I would also encourage you to look at even, your social media support system, the ability to be able to go on sites like Career Circle and join, to be able to network, the ability to be able to join free events like virtual career fairs, the ability to be able to go on LinkedIn and create a presence and a brand for yourself. So going and taking a step back and looking at, what do I have within my wheelhouse? There are a lot of different tools that are now available in just today's job search, really taking advantage of all of those. I saw somebody in the chat was mentioning LinkedIn groups, alumni groups. It could be, groups within your own geographic area that could be a benefit. So there are ways to take advantage of those things, but it does start with you kind of putting yourself out there and taking a step back and saying, what do I have control over, versus saying, who do I know currently in my current network?
Absolutely. Anybody else want to share on this?
I agree with that completely. I mean, after I had my first child, I joined even the hospital networking groups. They had like postpartum groups, and I met some of the moms through these breastfeeding teas, believe it or not, where we would go and like learn how to be a mom. And they ended up having jobs at these amazing organizations, and they were some of the first ones that I ended up networking with when I was ready to go back to the workforce. So you can find those community groups through your local libraries, through your, even the hospitals, if you are going through postpartum right now. There's so many different avenues out there where I didn't know about it. And they bring like-minded people together, and people who also might need support at the same time, which can build really lasting relationships.
Absolutely. Thank y'all so much. I'm going to close it out. You all have been so inspiring, and I know that those nuggets that you've provided is something that these individuals on this call are going to be able to use to put in their toolbox. I want to make sure that I am inviting you all to our upcoming webinar that's going to be happening September the 26th, same place at 1 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. It's a preparation webinar for our upcoming virtual career fair that is going to be happening October the 3rd. October the 3rd, mark your calendars. You want to know what to expect, want to know how to organize or optimize your virtual career experience, register now going to the event section of the career website, the Career Circle website, okay? Thank you so much again. Thank you so much to our panelists for sharing your stories. You are so appreciated. Until next time, see you all September the 26th. Bye-bye.